whether it was from Africa to ancient Egyptian to the Vikings up in northern Europe, or the Ainu over in Japan, or the Pacific Islanders, the Native Americans, shamanism in an ancient way of life. Spirituality was ingrained in everything we did. There was recognition of this essence of spirit in all things. And there were various techniques and methods for achieving those altered states of consciousness to travel, right, through other planes, non-physical planes. And regardless of the specific techniques used, you find certain universal keys or universal aims that were happening amongst all the shamanic cultures. And so those universal principles are ultimately what we need to reclaim and regain. And whichever way you personally feel called to explore that, it is important to find a path that resonates within your own soul, that it feels like, yes, this fits me. But ultimately, those universal principles weave through many of them. But one of the other things that the ancient spiritual tribes had was not only the knowledge and the methods, but they had what was called initiations. An initiation was like an ancient technology, a spiritual technology for accelerating our evolution. And we're at a time right now where we need to accelerate our evolution. And yet this ancient way of life and a path of initiation has been largely lost in our world today. As we become more modernized, more scientific, more secularized, more materialistic, we've lost touch with the value of these ancient ways that helped to catalyze and accelerate our evolution. So I think a part of what needs to happen here is not only the understanding of the methods for altering consciousness, because there are many ways to do that, but also a reclaiming of the spiritual way of life that brings initiation and folds it back in from early age, and rites of passage that help our children to mature and, to overcome trials, because that is what builds character and strength. And in our world today, we're losing that. It's like everything is as easy as the touch of a button, or things that happen in video games, but we're losing touch with the reality, but also the rites of passage that we journey through in life to build character, to build depth, to get to know ourselves at deeper and deeper levels. And so I think if we can bring that process of initiation back into our world today in a way that fits with our modern sort of world, we're not going to go diving into pools of alligators, for example, to test our merit. We have to find ways that fit within our modern world, and yet initiation through these ancient lineages, that some of them are still intact on the planet today, is really, really key to helping accelerate that evolution. And then with those initiations are the tools and the teachings and the understanding and the methods and the empowerment that's in your own hands to then make it a way of life, to practice it. So it's not about the guru, it's not about somebody outside of you giving you your enlightenment. It's about you receiving and awakening that from within, because the power's in your hands. The tools get handed down to you, and then it's up to you to choose to use them. That's the universal essence of any spiritual path of progression, is you doing the work to awaken that within.
Thinking about your question, it was interesting because I haven't dealt a lot in the shamanistic disciplines. I've been more into the music, but as I was thinking while the others were talking, I'm going, but actually the music is part of all of that. Because if you go to, no matter what culture you go to, music is always a part of it. It's always been. You can go back as far as you want historically, and music has always been in there. And music is an aspect of our being that I was in a recording studio with Michael Terrell one time, And there was a chart up there that said, music is what our thoughts sound like. And I thought, that is so true. Because there's so many times we have these thoughts, but we don't know how to express it outwardly. And music gives us that vehicle that we can do that with. And then understand, and then as I've been studying more into the frequencies, I'm beginning to understand that getting the frequencies right is like taking it another step. Because as I'm going to teach a little bit, I believe that we were actually created with frequencies, and so that if we can be on the right tune, like with my harp, I have to tune it before I play it, because otherwise it doesn't sound right. Well, we need to get tuned as well. And so I think these frequencies are part of tuning us. And the final thing I would say that kind of connects with shamanism, or as you're saying, is, going back to scripture again, it says that we are called to be a nation of kings and priests. I think the priest is kind of like the shaman. I don't know, maybe I'm not understanding it correctly, but in other words, taking care of that spiritual part of us that is reaching out to our Creator, to I like to call him my Heavenly Father, but that's the part of us that is not affected by what the world around us is doing. It's the part of us that affects the world around us of what we're doing. It's a part of us that makes the determination of how we are going to leave the world, or how we are going to affect the world, how we are going to change the world. Instead of letting the world change us, it's how we are going to do what we are going to do to change the world around us. And so that would be my contribution.
Great question, and I'm glad you drank the Kool-Aid today. Good job. And I want to start actually by acknowledging my pleasure that J.J. and DesireeHurtak made it here, because we haven't met before. And his book, The Keys of Enoch, the Book of Knowledge, was quite influential. And I might be one of the few people like Greg Braden that actually read it cover to cover. It is really dense esoterica, and I love it. You may know that I have a supplement company called Gematria, and I gave it that name because it was in the glossary of the book. Defined as, I recall, the science of determining the input energy required to build a body of consciousness. You might also find it interesting that the technology that we work with, that is laser-based, creates what you describe in the book as the vector sun zero, that has profound effects on consciousness. Well, we make it, and we can do it across the visible spectrum, and we can modulate it to make it even more informationally dense and profound. What I love about the question is that it really challenges Western scientists who get pushed into a mold of thinking in only a certain way. And as someone who's really interested in creating a better reality, I feel that any scientist in any field needs to be willing to look at all the information, all of the sources, whether it's from his own culture and his own spiritual tradition, or if it's any other. So along the way, I've journeyed with shamans in the rainforest. I was a Sufi mystic with the guru for 10 years, all during medical training, actually. I trained with a medical intuitive. I've studied the Eastern shamanic practices. I've been pretty much throughout the world studying anything and everything. And I believe the ultimate medicine and the ultimate system takes the best of everything and individualizes it to what that person needs. So I think there's a place for the wisdom of every single tradition across the planet. Now I go a bit further and I include the otherworldly intelligences as well. For those of you who like to think along those lines, it used to be just one other civilization, and now it's up to 24. So I like to cast a wide net, and I think that in any discipline, science or otherwise, that if your goal is to create the best of the best, it is wise to include all sources of information as potentially very valuable. Thank you.
All fantastic answers. We're running a little bit short of time, so I'm going to go over here now to the left.
Hello? There is a scientific physics quantum that talks about transurfing. I just want to know if you've heard about it. His name is Zenon. And if yes, it talks mainly about co-creating our life based on the quantum theory. And I would like to have your opinion on it.
So you've never heard that before? Yeah, we can talk in general. Okay, we'll start this way.
So yeah. So I think we don't know that particular philosophy, but if you want to talk about co-creating who we are through the quantum field, that I think a lot of us can talk on, especially Theresa and others. And we would start with the idea that if we understand quantum consciousness, it's that every possibility is out there. You know, you can wake up in the morning and you can say, oh, I only have to do it this way, and that's the only possibility I have to, you know, change my life, to create a project, to do whatever. But in actuality, there are multiple possibilities for all of us all the time. And it's a matter of clearing that image of our limitation. And really, I have to say it, right now, and we are still, I love that scenario ability, we are still crawling on the floor, you know, so, you know, you're trying to get to the doorway, or you're trying to get to, you're not able to stand up. Plato said this, you know, there's all these people standing in the cave, it's the Allegory of Plato's cave, and they've been chained, and they're always looking at the backside of the cave, and all of a sudden, something changes, or some people turn around and they see that there's a light, and then they see that there's a door, and I think that's exactly what's happening. But the majority of people are happy facing the wall chained, and that's the difference of where we are right now. The possibilities are starting to become more and more evident to us. We're actually even being told by people in this conference this whole weekend, you can turn around, you can move into the light, you can break the chains. But now it's all up to free will. And that's very important because we all have free will with every moment. Actually, Greg Braden, Bruce Lipton, and ourselves are part of a book called Our Moment of Choice. And every moment is our moment of choice. And when we make certain choices that lead us into that higher evolutionary status, then we're able to really change reality for ourselves. And I think that's how it works with the quantum field.
I would add to that, in the rediscovery of our spiritual dynamic is the idea not to be afraid of experience, to reach out beyond the confines of the old scientific method. In fact, our late colleague, John Mack from Harvard University, said we need a new ontology or basis of scientific truth. We are at the crossroads of a whole new conceptual vocabulary, but a whole new process of a social dynamic that spans all of the disciplines. And there's some fancy words, surfing this and surfing that, but I like the expression swimming in hyperspace. This is what it is. It's the great beyond in all levels, in height, width, depth, and volume that requires our ability of participation. To reach out and not be afraid of the divine birthright that stands before us, to me, is going to make the difference between the old and the new. And along with this is the importance of understanding that all life is vibrations. And the more we use these greater vibrations of music, transformational linguistics, social interactions, the easier it's going to be to realize the cosmic potential that we represent. We are involved in this man-God, woman-God partnership. And I think this is going to require us to be, shall we say, champions of the great charter of human potential, and not to step back with the unfortunate horizons of negativity that will always be there in terms of the separation of the scientific on one side and the spiritual on the other. It's the marriage of the scientific and the spirituality that will define a whole new charter of evolution. We will understand that we are part of a higher evolution when the final word is written and spoken from the inner heartbeats. Thank you.
I 100% agree with that. Your question, I think, was very specific to a particular book and a particular author and his theory. But what I will say, is, which I can't speak to because I'm not familiar with it, but what I will say is that I believe that we have a panel tonight that's directed exactly towards that topic. So I would come back, and it's such a vast conversation around how we can co-create our lives from the quantum that we can't really answer that in 2 minutes. So I do want to give another chance, unless anyone else here wants to address that particular one. I want to give another chance for another question before our 6.5 minutes is up for this welcome panel.
Great question, by the way. You got some significant answers. Wanna crack at it?
Well, you raised the question of quantum co-creation. And the reality is that's all we ever do anyway. It's really just a question of how good you are at it, doing it consciously. I'm sure it's not working. If you dive into a deep understanding of the structure of physical reality, which Theresa could have commented upon, which is this notion of the so-called zero-point energy. How many of you have heard of that phrase? How many of you understand what that really means? So it's tossed around a lot, and it's actually far more bizarre than the simplicity of the term suggests, because it is understood that in addition to the physical particles that we can touch and feel, there is this constant production of what are called virtual particles, particles of light, that have an almost infinite level of production, at least very high level production, at every single point in space. And because these are created randomly in all directions, the sum of the vectors, say in the vacuum of space, would sum essentially to zero. But if you took all of that virtual potential energy and converted that to physical energy, and then converted to mass with Einstein's E equals mc squared equation, the mass that would be produced from a cubic inch of apparent vacuum would exceed by orders of magnitude the entire mass of the known universe. So what that means is that the only way anything is created is through a type of awareness that creates a net vector in this quantum foam, as it were, this seething mass of potential energy. So the ability to become a conscious creator is a function not of whether you can do it, it's a function of disburdening yourself more and more of all the limitations around it, which is where clearing your ancestral history comes into it, clearing your unresolved unconscious conflicts comes into it. And if you're really being esoteric, clearing the balances in the so-called karma or soul history. And we have examples of evolved masters like Sai Baba, who would materialize objects out of thin air. There's an incredible book that some of you may have seen called The Life and Teachings of the Masters of the Far East, which is actually written in the 1920s by Baird T. Spalding. And there's a group of 12 scientists that went to India to prove that the holy men were just magicians and fooling people into giving them all their money. And what they discovered was real masters. And they described experiments where a master would disappear, and minutes later, another scientist would record that they appeared, that person, 1,000 miles away. They would manifest their dinner out of thin air. If they went to a restaurant, they'd manifest the money Wouldn't that be a good trick? And Sai Baba would literally walk around thousands of people and create barrels of holy ash called booty in a day. So our ability to quantum co-create is almost unlimited if we realize we can do it and leave our limitations around it. And that may be the main reason that you're here this weekend, is to learn more of the methodology, but also to clear the limits of doing that. And may do it well.
Fantastic, Doctor. Okay, next question. Oh, yes, I don't hear. I'm sorry. I skipped over the middle. I skipped over the side the first time. Go ahead, guys.
He's been standing there the whole time.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Glad somebody spoke up.
First of all, I would like to say peace, abundance, prosperity, longevity. My question is, in my opinion, there was truly a quantum leap of human consciousness in 2020, and you either continue to ride the wave of mass deception, mass manipulation, or you evolved. My question is what is your take? What is your perspective on that time in history in 2020? Because I really feel, like I said, just a minute ago, there was truly a quantum leap of human consciousness, and I know for me, myself, it was the most I've ever evolved in my entire life, and it was life-changing.
Humanity reaches these points, these precipices where a little nudge will push you over the edge. And one of the most amazing things that happened during the whole global sickness, that's what I call it, it sent people home. Whereas we were like rats in a maze. Even myself included, I was flying all over the world nonstop, which I still love to do, but I was going from conference to conference, to meeting, to presentation to presentation, nonstop, and doing my archaeology and everything else. But it was a nonstop rat race for me, and for the average person, just traveling back and forth. You got 1 hour in the morning to get up and eat and drive, sometimes an hour or so to get to work, and you got to work 8 hours, come back home, eat again, look at the kids, kiss them on the cheek, and the next thing you know, you're taking a nap, and it's time to get up and do it all over again. So there was no time for reflection. There was no time for growth. You're going to see even an expansion in a lot of the children from that time period, because fortunately, a lot of parents took the time to spend time with their kids for the first time in a long time. So in one way, this thing was a curse, but it was also a gift, because parents stopped letting kids be babysat by video games. Not all of them, but quite a few that I've talked to, at least in some of my circles. And then a lot of people took the opportunity for self-growth, self-expansion, self-exploration. They had time to sit down and read books. Book sales went through the roof. I sold more books during that time period than any other period of the book sales. The books exploded. People had time to research and take time to dig into information, ask themselves questions, and then go look for their own answers. And thankfully, a conscious community had already been built, sitting here just waiting for everyone to get some time to sit back and dig into this information and this content instead of just glimpsing over it, carelessly and then moving on. And so the opportunity was there. So to answer your question, it was the whole global sickness of 2020, that lockdown that happened, that came and really gave humanity a time to take a break from the monotony of the rat race so they can reflect on themselves. And once you reflect internally, a lot of answers begin to reveal themselves. You ever heard the saying, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear?
Yep.
Oh, we're at 0 time. Mr. Richard. Okay, I guess we'll keep going until he stops us.
I love that question. It's something that when the pandemic was hitting and lockdown was starting to happen, I thought, wow, there's a real opportunity here in this process. And in my book, Game Changers, Social Alchemists for the 21st Century, I talk about the process that we've been going through as a human race, and that we are on an evolutionary journey. Now, I compare it to the alchemical stages. There's 7 stages of alchemy. And it really felt like 2020, we finally got immersed into the dark night of the soul. And in alchemy, that dark night of the soul is this place where we are facing all the inner darkness, all the stuff that holds us down into the ego, and that we need to let go of the old paradigm, the old identity that doesn't really serve us and that clouds us from the truth of who we are. The fears, all the attachments that come from that. And the best thing that you could do during that stage, they call it the fermentation stage in alchemy, is to withdraw and to go on an inner vision quest, a vision quest within the self. And so for the people, such as yourself, it sounds like, who really took the time to venture inwards and to really ask, like, who am I? What do I really want to do? What is my purpose? And really take the time to introspect and let go and to realize, how is living my life before wasn't sustainable. And so we need to let go of that. Those who took that time to do so then broke out of that chrysalis into a whole new way. They made that quantum leap. But as you said, those who didn't, they're still fighting their way through the chrysalis of the last 2 years. So I see that our time is definitely up, as Richard is here saying, wrap it up. But yes, we are at that quantum leap time. And these are the most exciting times to be alive. And I want to thank all of you for being here.
Okay, we're going to take a 15-minute break, and then we'll introduce Steve Breeze. Steve Breeze next. So 15-minute break, and we'll be right back.
See you guys tomorrow. Pleasure meeting you guys. I'll see you guys tomorrow early in the morning. Connect. Obviously.
I thought there'd be more people here.
Did you?
Yeah.
I want to see that Dr. Ovokaitys.
Tonight?
Yeah, did he speak? Oh, the doctor that was up there.
It's the gene technology with the white hair. Long hair?
With the
White
beard?
hair.
With the beard?
Him.
Yes.
Oh. Todd.
Dr. Todd. He sounds like he has a lot of information.
That's tonight.
I've never seen him though.
I have. I've watched a lot of his content on YouTube.
Oh wow.
Oh, really? I haven't seen him
What does
either.
he talk about? I know stem cells, right?
Yes.
DNA and longevity.
It's literally about that, and it's for me. I have a very surface level interpretation of his work, whereas Greg Braden and Bruce Lipton, I'm way more aware and conscious of what they're presenting.
Yeah.
So for me to speak about his work, I don't feel qualified.
Yeah, I'm very curious about what he does. It's very interesting.
Yes.
Billy's the only guy I know. I've seen him a lot. Not in person, but
Yes.
on different shows. And
What was the name that you said?
Billy Carson.
Oh.
This guy, actually.
Yes, I've watched a lot of his content as well.
I never knew about his history, though. You know, his childhood.
Right, I didn't either, and it's so amazing to learn that. It just adds a whole level of respect for somebody. For me, it does.
I agree. Yeah.
But those are